Hey everyone, this is Daniel Litwin, the voice of B2B, and welcome to another episode of Ground Truth, a Phantom Auto podcast. Again, I'm your host, Daniel Litwin, and thank you again for joining us on Phantom Auto's podcast. We appreciate you joining us for some broader industry thought leadership as we maneuver today's topic. Make sure that you're heading to our website, phantomauto.com. Again, phantomauto.com. For more information on our solutions and services and for some more Phantom Auto content, including podcasts, videos, and more. Also, make sure you're subscribing to Ground Truth on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So today we're going to be discussing some supply chain challenges. The supply chain is facing a number of compounding issues today that were very difficult to predict a year and a half ago. I think that has become just sort of a common truth. And on today's episode of the podcast, we're digging into both the short-term and the long-term effects of COVID on the broader supply chain, figuring out just how the industry should prepare for the continuously growing pressures of consumer demands, for example, and how we should navigate the adoption of autonomous technology across the supply chain to help fill these gaps. So we're going to be doing a lot of technology-related conversation today with our guest. And for insights, we're joined by Evan Rago. He's Strategic Sales Manager at Phantom Auto. He's been in the industry for 10 plus years and ready to give us some perspective. Evan Rago, great to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Real pleasure getting to source your insights today. So again, you've been in the industry 10 plus years. So you know the supply chain pretty well, and the fact that even without COVID, it can face a lot of unpredictable disruptions. So with all of that as context, would you say that the supply chain now post-COVID is better off than it was a year ago? Did we learn any invaluable lessons that actually give the supply chain more to work with? Are there any positives you think we can take away?
Yeah, Daniel, that is a really great question. Thank you for asking that. So the supply chain as it stands today, it's in a better position than it was pre-COVID, but it's not, exactly where it needs to be. So it's slightly improved, but there's always been problems and there's always been inefficiencies. But COVID really highlighted those problems and those inefficiencies, and it was, it really served as kind of a wake-up call. That these companies that I'm working with in warehousing and manufacturing, they know now that they need to adopt technologies and become more flexible, become more agile, and address these inefficiencies. So that being said, I think that it is slightly better positioned, or in a better position, but it's better positioned to improve and get where it needs to be.
Yeah, I'd phrase it, I guess just some like common terms as like constructive criticism for the supply chain, a year of constructive criticism, which again, is constructive. Like you said, positions the industry well to adapt to these changes better in the future. But yeah, to your point, I still think is facing a lot of short-term recovery as well as long-term adjustment to, well, what do we do with these truths that we've learned, these deficiencies in the supply chain that we've identified because of the last year of a global pandemic? What do we do now, right? And I think that's where the industry is at. So there's potential for optimism, but obviously needs to be executed correctly. So that's also what we're going to be discussing today. You mentioned it yourself. COVID did reveal a lot of existing deficiencies in the supply chain, didn't just introduce new problems, but accelerated existing ones. So I'm curious where along the supply chain you see the most need for these kinds of efficiency improvements. Where are those touch points, and why do you see these as the main ones to improve?
Yeah, so I would say right off the bat, labor. Labor is a very big issue, in manufacturing, warehousing. Folks can't find labor. They can't retain labor. Labor's too expensive. So there's a lot of inefficiencies as it poses for labor, and tons of companies are looking into automation to solve these labor issues. Unfortunately, there's inefficiencies with the autonomous solutions that are out there as well. So it's not always a seamless adoption for these autonomous technologies. So when I think about the inefficiencies in the supply chain, currently, I would put them into three buckets, really. The first bucket being labor. The second bucket being the technology adoption process, I believe is very inefficient. as well as operational inefficiencies. So just whatever operational wastes, whether that's, picking wrong pallets, taking them to the wrong locations, mispicks, errors, and folks are starting to rethink their strategies now too. Like in manufacturing, is just in time the right, the right methodology? Does it make more sense to have excessive inventory? And so it's really, there's, keep going back to COVID. It's really made a lot of folks rethink how they're operating, made them rethink, how do we become more flexible and agile? And what does flexibility and agility even mean, for the future? That being said, the labor inefficiencies are probably stand out as the most glaring one, because that's what's driving the technology adoption for automation. And then, the operational inefficiencies that have always been there.
And what I want to do now is kind of bounce around those three buckets that you laid out for us. Again, operational deficiencies, issues with adopting technology correctly and maximizing that technology, and then maneuvering a variety of different labor challenges for day-to-day operations as well. So let's start with just the operational challenges, the ones that you say have kind of always been there. And I'm also going to intersect some of the ways COVID accelerated those challenges. One of those big ones I'd say is consumer demand, which because of the pandemic was sort of all at once refocused through very specific channels. An omni-channel sales approach is now developed from this, but mostly people were buying their basic goods through e-commerce channels, and that pushed a lot of companies to have to refocus how they intake these orders, and it doesn't seem like this consumer demand is going to be slowing down anytime soon. So how are you seeing this place pressure on the supply chain? Is this something that the industry is still having to adapt to, or is this one of the easier challenges to adjust to? What are you seeing?
No, this creates quite an issue in the supply chain, because the consumer expects, at the same costs and, just as quickly as they did before COVID. And to couple that, there's also, some trade war things going on with China that's creating even further stress on the supply chain. So that being said, it's not going to slow down. It's not going anywhere. Unfortunately, though, a lot of these companies are having a tough time, finding labor to being able to support, these operations. It's really crazy right now to be, an operations manager, or to be in control of those types of, those types of activities in warehousing, manufacturing. So, it's really going to be the technologies that these folks adopt that is going to determine their outcomes of tomorrow. And so what we're seeing is to address labor, a lot of folks are turning to autonomous systems and automation, which is great. There's AMRs and AGVs, but all of that is basically just autonomous material handling, and they're great for doing point A to point B activities. But unfortunately, the perception the customer's perception is actually much greater of what they can do and kind of how they're sold. And so they have this vision of, automating every part move in their facility. But really you need somebody watching these vehicles, right? And somebody who is constantly monitoring these vehicles. So the idea there is that you have a fleet of all these autonomous systems moving around, and then you have a couple of guys on site who are constantly going out and intervening when human intervention is required, whether that's a loss of localization, whether that's it sees the LiDAR sees something that it's getting confused. So then they realize, wow, these systems can't handle what we thought they could. But now we have a team that we hired that is following the AGVs, the AMRs, automation around. And so really, what's cool about Phantom's technology is that we provide the ability for folks to telemonitor, assist, and control any type of unmanned vehicle. And so really, how this ties in is, if you need a teleoperations strategy if you're going to have an automation strategy. And a lot of folks figure that out on the back end the wrong way, right? They go to automation, they see, hey, it's not performing as it was sold, or there's these issues, and then they think about adopting the teleoperation strategy. But really, adopting the teleoperation strategy or remote control of forklifts on the front end is what we're seeing is the most efficient practice.
Another point that I want to intersect before we delve a little deeper into integrating teleoperations, with intention and, to maximize the technology, as well as before we chat more about those labor challenges you've been describing. I think this broader conversation of introducing autonomous technology, especially something like teleoperation, also plays into some of the health and safety measures that had to be implemented because of COVID. And now we're sort of in a limbo of what do we do with the future of these, adaptive operations? Do they continue or do they not? So I'm curious if you see COVID measures for the warehouse floor, like distancing protocols or general sanitation practices, carrying over long-term for the industry? Do you think they're going to adapt to some kind of hybrid version? What do you think? And, why do you land there?
Yeah, so I think whatever is most efficient is typically what's going to win out. There's a lot of organizations put standard operating procedures in place, but whatever's the most efficient on the floor in the day-to-day operations is what's going to prevail. And so I really don't see some of the distancing and certain precautions that are being taken now carrying over. I don't. But I do see companies preparing for the next pandemic, or putting plans in place to become more flexible and agile. And so a lot of companies are turning to automation, and they're turning to different technologies, innovative technologies. So it's interesting because we're in the fourth significant shift in modern industry. And so there's a whole bunch of, there's 9 pillars to Industry 4.0. And, remote control or teleoperation isn't exactly mentioned in any of those, but it ties into all 9 of them. And so really, starting with kind of that teleoperation strategy is it's really groundbreaking. Like whenever we talk about agility and flexibility, imagine if you could apply labor with the click of a button when and where it is needed. So our the end users, people who are getting the products are clicking a button and expecting it at the door. Now, what if in operations somebody can click a button and deploy labor at any one of its facilities at any time? So there's a high demand in Washington. You have 3 people on forklifts there, that you just teleported in to help out. And then you have something going on in Alabama. Those same workers can now teleport to that facility in Alabama, all on the same shift. So, being able to apply that labor when and where it is needed directly aligns with the agility and flexibility of, what our customers need.
Yeah, no, thank you for all that context. And that leads me right into my next question, which, first I want to give some research to our audience here. There's some research from Deloitte and the Manufacturing Institute that came out relatively recently that's now showing as many as 2.1 million manufacturing jobs could go unfilled through 2030. So that's a bit of a long projection there, but still, through 2030, it could end up costing the U.S. economy $1 trillion. Which is not an insignificant amount of money. So I'm curious how you see this workforce gap shaping some of the different B2B relationships across the supply chain. Obviously, this impacts manufacturing operations, but how is this impacting the broader supply chain? What kind of domino effects is this potential long-term gap creating?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about domino effects, it ultimately is going to affect the end customer. And that's going to affect them in their lead times, the time it takes for them to get, what they want. It's going to affect their pocketbooks as well. And so really, whenever the biggest gap is, right now is like you mentioned, labor, right? People can't find people to fill these positions, whether that's driving in a warehouse or driving in a manufacturing plant. And so whenever you can't find labor, your throughput decreases, your operation slows down, you become less efficient, and you have to raise costs. So ultimately, it's going to be a cost raise, and it's going to create longer lead times. So in today's consumer driven market, that's not really not feasible.
And then do you have any insights for us on why we're seeing this gap? Where is the disconnect as we see both record job openings, but also really high unemployment numbers? So there is a large labor pool just kind of broadly. I'm curious if this is a challenge that the industry has been facing long term, even before COVID, or if there's a different reason why we're not seeing manufacturing workers return en masse. And if there's a continuing education piece, a workforce education piece here to intersect as well, feel free to offer that perspective. But really, just why are you seeing this gap in your perspective?
If anybody has spent significant time in a manufacturing facility, 8 to 12 hours, it's not the most pleasant environment. Folks now don't want to do those jobs. They want to sit in an office. They want to be comfortable. They want to have flexibility to work from home. Really, it's folks. These jobs are going unfilled because people don't want them. So we might have a lot of people that are looking for positions, but they don't see themselves as manufacturers. They don't see themselves as driving forklifts. But whenever you tell them they can move material or work from an office location, that's a lot more appealing. And so not only is it more appeal, and the demographic too is big. The demographic in this industry for material handling industry is 95% male. People are trying to fill these positions, but there's a very specific demographic that they have to, or that they're going after. So if you can expand your labor pool to women, folks that are disabled, digital natives, now you are, you're finding people, you're finding the work that you need. You're finding the workforce that is going to help you achieve your goals, in the future.
You also mentioned worker retention strategies, and obviously there is still an existing warehouse workforce that is also in the middle of this transitionary flexion point, I'd say, for the industry. So I'm curious if you're also seeing manufacturing workers already in the industry demand anything of their companies, or what is the relationship like between existing workers and the manufacturing hubs? And how is this shaping retention strategies? Where are some of the gaps there?
Yeah, so there's an extremely high amount of turnover. I've talked with some organizations where it's 100% annually for some of these more labor positions, especially in say like cold storage or something where it's just not a pleasant environment. And so these folks are demanding, more money. They're demanding opportunities for advancement. Whenever the people see themselves in that position, they don't envision something that's comfortable. They also don't see it as a future-proof position. A lot of people see robots are coming. They see automation. They know that their job is it's potentially going to be taken. So they're looking for something that's more skilled. This workforce that we're working with now, or the new digital natives, it is a more skilled workforce that's coming into that's coming into work now. So when it comes to retention, I would say that it's very poor. And so a lot of organizations need to come up with strategic staffing initiatives. And that's actually, why a lot of organizations come and work with Phantom Auto is based off, is to develop those strategic staffing initiatives. We're creating digital drivers. This is a job of the future. This job is not going anywhere. It's extremely fascinating.
You mentioned a little earlier that this kind of technology enables the workforce pool to expand and to leverage not only a lot of demographics that normally wouldn't be considered or just today aren't a part of the manufacturing workforce, but also could leverage different skilled workers, digital natives, folks that are more used to doing white collar style office work, bringing them into a manufacturing context. So I'm curious what you see as the balance of technology like this being something that companies can use to just completely expand the work pool and try to find folks outside of a traditional manufacturing workforce pool to bring on board versus taking the existing workforce of the manufacturing hub and transitioning them into being able to maneuver and use this technology as well. So, expanding the work pool versus upskilling, is there a balance there? Do they both coexist? What are you seeing?
It certainly coexist. Like I said, there's folks on the floor, right? And they realize they see these robots coming in. They know that they need to there needs to be other opportunities. So unions actually love our technology. Unions are a big fan of Phantom Auto because we're upskilling their workforce. But then, that's not enough. There needs to be more people. There needs, people, everyone needs drivers. And that being said, that's where expanding the labor pool comes in. So it's really two birds with one stone, Daniel.
And that's exciting to hear. We definitely should do some follow-up conversations here with some of those different players in the niche manufacturing use cases to hear how Phantom Auto is working for them. Last but not least, what I want to ask you about is technology adoption challenges. So obviously teleoperation is pretty straightforward in concept, but an application might be very new for a lot of people. And for a lot of organizations, just at more of a bureaucratic or structural level, how do we integrate this and how do we know if we're seeing the right returns, right? So what are some of the broader adoption challenges you have seen? Why are they there? And what strategies have you offered to maneuver those?
Yeah, so it really, this is a very novel idea. And this is a very novel concept to a lot of people. And think about it. You are driving a forklift from a computer, from a desk. It is very similar to a video game, but this is not a video game. This is real life. And so, we need to make sure that we have the best practices and processes in place to mitigate, any chance of accidents or potential incidences on site. So that's one of the biggest challenges to getting folks to adopt the technology is we have to really educate them on the safety aspect and the safety component. And so we have partnered with 6 safety sensors. The vehicle's not going to hit anything, run into anything. But what's really interesting is the feedback that we're getting when the operators start using the vehicle is that they feel like they have greater operational awareness because now they have 360-degree view around them. There are no more blind spots. Blind spots are one of the leading causes of forklift accidents in North America. So this is a complete everybody has to be involved, whether that's HR, your risk assessment team, your safety team, your operations team. And so, each of, those folks have their concerns or their questions or things that need clarified. And typically it comes from safety, the IT integration. We have not had any, problems deploying that to date, and even with some government customers. In ROI, yes, operations very concerned in ROI. This is a very ROI driven industry, ROI driven business, and it's funny. I talk to a lot of people, and they say, what is the value of taking an operator off of a vehicle and just putting him into putting them into a warehouse, or I mean, an office. Like, where are my savings? It's not clicking. So there's direct cost savings that come from that, and then there's efficiency gains, and where it's creating value. And so for the direct cost areas that are impact are, imagine having a workforce in California, and you set up a digital driving center in Oklahoma, and you pay the drivers in California $27, and you pay the drivers in Oklahoma $20. So $7 difference. You might not think that is that large, but when you extrapolate just for one driver, a labor arbitrage of $7, you're saving over $14,000 per year per operator. So that's just right on the labor arbitrage. Now there's safety increases. You're taking the driver out of the equation. You're increasing safety. So if you look at your cost of safety incidents, that's gonna decrease. Another interesting thing that people don't realize is workers' compensation. So workers' comp premiums are through the roof for people in warehouses and manufacturing, because it's dangerous. Directly here in North America, we reduce taking a worker from a manufacturing or warehouse environment and putting them into an office. It creates an 85% reduction in those costs there. Now, this is where efficiencies start coming in. So you have overtime costs. Imagine being able to apply labor when and where it's needed, so to smooth out your overtime and reduce your overtime costs. So there's a whole host of efficiency gains also that come with it. But thinking about the ROI, really the best practice is to just sit down together and go through your operations. And then, building out that model. And really, that's how we handle the conversation of, the one-to-one replacement. I'm just not seeing it and I'm not getting it. So sitting down, walking through that ROI model is very important for the adoption of this technology. But the really something that's super impactful whenever we're doing ROI calculations is efficiency gains. And so now we talked first about just direct cost reductions with safety incidents, workers' comp, overtime, labor arbitrage. Now the really, really impactful thing is the efficiency gains. So utilization, making sure that you're getting more utilization out of your workforce, out of the vehicles. So with the efficiency gains, that's where we're seeing the biggest savings for our customers. And we're talking $100,000 for one operator, one single operator going from, becoming 10% more efficient throughout the year creates $100,000 in value. And that's one shift, one operator.
Evan Rago, thank you so much for your insights. It's really been a pleasure chatting today and getting this overview of challenges with the supply chain post-COVID, where the industry is at, and how investments in technology can help address a lot of different pain points across that supply chain. So again, for our audience, we've been chatting with Evan Rago, Strategic Sales Manager at Phantom Auto. And Evan, if folks want to find out more about Phantom Auto and your technologies and solutions, or maybe just get in contact with the team, how can they do so?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you guys can email me directly, evan@phantomauto.com, EVAN @phantomauto.com. And, I'll point you in the right direction. And or you can email sales@phantomauto.com, go on the website, phantomauto.com. So we're out there, and there'll be clear directions on how to reach us on the webpage. So
a one-name email, that's called power. I love it. Evan Rago, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure again, and I'm looking forward to having you back on. We'll chat again soon.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it.
And thank you, everyone, for watching this episode of Ground Truth, a Phantom Auto podcast. If you enjoyed what you saw and heard and want some more Phantom Auto content, make sure you're heading to our website, phantomauto.com. Again, phantomauto.com, as well as subscribing to Ground Truth on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'm your host, Daniel Litwin, the voice of B2B, and we'll catch you next time on another episode of Ground Truth.